Hello and welcome to the Paris Fintech Forum Communities Programme. I'm Elliot Gotkin, I'm a journalist and with Laurent Nisri, co-host of this exclusive video interview series produced with the support of Solaris Bank, Rise and BPI France. Now, as so much of our business, personal and financial lives have moved online, it's become ever more critical to be able to quickly, accurately and securely verify who everyone is. Fortunately, there's been an explosion of innovation in the space with a herd of startups doing just that. One of Europe's biggest is IDnow. The company's CEO is Andreas Bodczek, who joins me now. Great to see you, Andreas.
Great to see you, Elliot.
So give us the kind of 60-second lowdown, if you could, on IDnow. What is it that you do and how do you do it?
Here at IDnow, we're helping large enterprise customers, banks, financial fintech companies to make sure that whoever they interact with is who they pretend to be. So we're in the business of identity verification. Our heritage is here in the German-speaking markets. We have, over the last couple of years, broadened the business, the footprint of the business to other European markets, in the UK, in France. And our approach these days is one where we really take the challenge of solving identity verification off the shoulders of our customers. We provide a holistic platform to address all things identity management and identity verification during the onboarding process.
Right, and you mentioned banks and financials, but I think you also work with gaming companies, perhaps even dating apps, or anyone else who needs to know who their customer is. So tell me a bit more about your kind of, the broad swathe of clientele that you have.
Yeah, that's something that's very interesting to observe or watch really over the last couple of years. It all started out with anti-money laundering regulation, video then being one of the first products that IDnow had offered to the market. But these days, with ever more high-value transactions moving online, it becomes ever more important to verify identity basically for almost every part of your daily life, be that sports betting, be that mobility, think about car rental, car sharing services, be that insurance, think about e-patient data, health insurance data, central data, health data portals where you want to make sure that only the right people can access these data. Think about even services like dating. I just read that Tinder has introduced an identity verification step in their onboarding process. So it's becoming more ubiquitous, and I think it provides for great opportunity for a number of players in the market. And I'm very happy that we're actually riding this wave and are, also, I would argue, quite ahead of the curve in terms of the way we're thinking about the industry.
Right. I guess on dating apps, people will still look nothing like their pictures, but at least we know they are who they say they are. In terms of traction, tell me about some of the growth that IDnow has been experiencing. What kind of experience did you have during the pandemic, for example, up until now?
IDnow has been, let's say, benefiting from the digitization trend for many years. So the company has been growing really nicely over the last 8 years since its inception. I would argue that the pandemic certainly has helped or has pushed the growth even a little bit further. And actually in two dimensions. One is the number of transactions, the number of identifications that we're processing every day, with some of the usual channels like branch offices becoming unavailable for almost 18 months now. The sheer number of identity verifications have risen sharply. But I'd say what's even more exciting also with regards to the future is the fact that more and more of our target clientele, large enterprises, really embrace the need to digitize core processes. So our order book for the coming years has grown sharply, alongside the number of identifications we're already processing. So both very encouraging. On the other hand, it's also quite sobering to see that it took the pandemic to get there. Sad enough, but I'd say overall, if we look at the last 18 months, despite all the operational challenges the pandemic meant to us as a partner for our enterprise clients, we're positive about. We think positively about the impact it had on the need for the services that we provide.
And in June, you acquired a French rival called Ariadnext for a reported 50 million euros. You've also done a number of other acquisitions. Are more acquisitions on the cards? And can you share with us kind of how big your war chest is?
So, as you would probably expect, if there were any more on the cards, then unfortunately, usually not able to share them right before anything would be firmly agreed and signed. But if you think about the identity verification market, both in Europe but also globally, still a very fragmented market. It's still heavily influenced by domestic regulation, in particular on the anti-money laundering side. Also, the interpretation of some of the qualified e-signature legislation is different across various countries. In essence, that means that there's a number of smallish, smaller, subscale, however you want to phrase that, companies in many markets. And we are convinced here at IDnow that identity will play a pivotal role in anything we do in the connected world going forward. And for that, in order to live up to the expectation of large customers, but also the expectations, quite frankly, of stringent regulators, you have to build companies of significant scale. And the transactions, in particular, the last two we've done, the acquisition here of Identity TM in Germany, which was more of a market consolidation move in the German market, but also the acquisition of Ariadnext in France, which was more an expansion of our geo footprint and a round off of the product portfolio. They both are a piece of the mosaic of that getting to larger scale.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Interestingly, you became CEO of IDnow not as one of the founders, but actually as an angel investor in the company, and then you became CEO. How did that come about? Because it's not a very kind of we don't meet many CEOs who started out as investors in the company.
Yeah, it's probably an odd one out here. I go back with some of the founders for more than 10 years. I co-founded a business back in 2009, based out of Berlin and San Francisco, a business by the name of Fiber. And one of the co-founders of IDnow was an early angel investor in that company. So that's how I got in touch with IDnow in the first place. We co-founded, grew, scaled, sold the previous company. And after my return from the US here to Germany, I got back in touch with the founders here at IDnow. And they were at a quite interesting point, I would almost say a turning point, where many startups would get to. It's like you have an early success, you have a team that's growing to 50, 100 people. And then what's next, right? There's capital is available in great amounts these days, but also you need to build the organization that allows you to scale the business beyond your domestic market, beyond a certain number of members on the team, beyond a certain number of large clients. So you cannot just build to everything to every client's order. So that was the time I got in touch with the co-founders and the board, and we developed a joint plan how to accelerate the growth. And then, despite actually the fact I hadn't even expected to take on an operational role again, I think the then shareholders and board liked what they saw, and they felt that it'd be a good fit. For me, it's a great, let's say, a great hybrid between being still entrepreneurial, but applying also some of the experience of my past, which is in parts entrepreneurial and founder, but also in parts more of a senior executive. So I think it's a great fit, and I'm enjoying the ride.
And this ride that you're on, I mean, obviously it kind of started quite some time ago. Was entrepreneurship something that ran in the family? Was this always your destiny to kind of be an investor and an entrepreneur, or was this something that just happened by accident?
I'd say it was, when I started my career, it was 1999. There's been, a number of very famous and some infamous companies growing quite quickly at the time. So I joined Bertelsmann, who ran, I think, a cohort of almost 200 companies at the time to seize the opportunity in the digital space. Via a few M&A moves, I ended up running the German fixed net business of Telefonica, which then later got rolled into O2. And I found myself a couple of years later sitting on the executive committee of O2 in Germany, and we started discussing whether or not, within the next 2 years, we could get an address field added to a database. And I realized that this would be way too corporate for what my passion is, and also what my aspiration would be. So that was, I think, the first 10 years were like very teaching, very exciting, and entrepreneurial in a let's say within a safe environment. With fiber, the journey of the true entrepreneur started, I would say. Now IDnow is in a very similar realm.
Okay. Well, look, Andreas, don't go away because we need to take a very quick break, after which we're going to continue our conversation with IDnow CEO Andreas Bodczek. Welcome back, and don't forget, if you're not already a full member of our community, everything you need to join can be found at www.parisfintechforum.com. Now, Andreas, I've got some more questions for you, so let's talk about kind of the fintech ecosystem in general. As well as being an entrepreneur, as we discussed, you're an investor too. What gets you most excited about the German tech ecosystem right now?
As you can tell by my gray hair, I've been around for a while. It's great to see that the ecosystem here in Germany, and I'd say across Europe, has matured significantly over the course of the last 10 years. If I go back to the days of fiber, when we raised our seed or pre-seed round, as it would have been called, would have been 6-digit, maybe low 7 digits at the time. You look at the amounts of capital that are available to strong entrepreneurs today. It's really encouraging to see. I'm also a firm believer that whatever the challenge we're facing, in society, in the economy today, will 95 or more percent of that will be addressed and solved through technology and data rather than traditional invention. So to that end, it's great to see that the European ecosystem is strengthening, that more and more successful companies, unicorns, maybe at some point even decacorns, coming out of Europe. The European market offers plenty of opportunity, given its size, but also to an extent its fragmentation, as opposed to the US domestic market. So I'd say a lot of good things going for the European markets right now. In terms of industries, obviously I'm looking a lot at fintech and regtech, just given my current role. And I'd say the future of money and the future how we're interacting and using money is something that's changing massively, and we only at the beginning. We're still talking onboarding. We're not talking about how you would, for example, change the way of saving and investing, in 5 or 10 years' time.
And Andreas, you talked about, in very optimistic terms, about the European and German ecosystems for technology. How much of a setback was the Wirecard fiasco? I'm asking you in particular because I know you acquired Wirecard Communication Services, which was a part of Wirecard. So how much of a setback was it to the European tech space? What happened to Wirecard? I know that the CEO of Raisin was telling me that it wasn't really considered a fintech, so it was like a very corporate thing, so it didn't really affect the fintech ecosystem. But just more broadly speaking, how much of a setback was it to have this kind of champion of technology and financial technology come a cropper the way that it did?
I would probably concur with what you just mentioned as the quote from the CEO of Raisin. Wirecard pre Q2 2020 would not have been considered a fintech by most of the people who would call themselves fintech entrepreneurs. So was it a setback? certainly on the macro level for some of the institutional funds, for politicians and governments. Was it ironic? Absolutely yes. I mean, we are in Germany. A part of our claim to fame would be that the German AML regulation is supposed to be one of the most stringent in the world. The video then product that we're offering, is what it is because of exactly that claim. To see a company coming out of Germany and standing for probably some of the largest fraud cases ever in corporate Europe is somewhat ironic in that context. I think on the other hand, on the positive side, it re-emphasizes the need for contemporary regulation, right? For regulators and regulation and legislation that's up to the standard of time and the standard of technology. Probably it's also fair to say that the Wirecard, it was sophisticated enough to slip through some of the nets that most of the other companies that I would call fintechs would be caught by anyway. So to that end, it's probably not a role model for the industry. It's more of an outlier. It's ironic in a way. We didn't perceive it as a setback, quite frankly. I think the industry moved on, watched in awe what was happening there. And for us on a micro level, it was even like we've been already working with a subsidiary of Wirecard, one of their operations centers as a service provider. And when the company fell in trouble, when we saw all these employees there, we felt it'd be a good move for us to bring them in house. Even so, to that end, we've had even let's say a somewhat positive outcome from the whole disaster, but it's obviously on a micro level more than on a macro level.
Right, of course. I guess in every crisis there's opportunity, and that was an opportunity for IDnow to go and purchase Wirecard communication services. But Andreas, I'm afraid we are out of time. But I really want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. Andreas Bodczek, CEO of IDnow. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm going to be back again with another big name from the world of finance and technology next week. I do hope everyone will be able to join us again then. In the meantime, you can keep up to date with all the exclusive interviews and content from the Paris FinTech Forum Communities Programme via www.parisfintechforum.com. Hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.